All right, we're going to start a unit on evolution, and today specifically we'll talk about um, uh, evidence that evolution has occurred. So there will be 8 pieces of evidence. So first of all, evolution is a change in species over time. So evolution occurs on a population level, not an individual level. So it's not like you as a single person or individual can evolve over time. So evolution occurs by random mutations. And so those mutations, if they're beneficial, they allow the person to reproduce. And so that feature or characteristic gets passed on. But if a mutation causes something that is not beneficial to the organism, maybe it get killed early, and so it can't get passed on because it couldn't reproduce. So there was actually 2 competing thoughts. So Lamarck actually, I think his was in the early 1800s, and Darwin was in the mid 1800s. But Lamarck thought that that traits were acquired, and so that evolution occurred when traits were acquired. And so giraffe with long necks was something that was acquired, and so they would pass that on. But it actually, Darwin was, the problem with Lamarck's theory was that you acquire traits, but if those traits aren't beneficial, then it wouldn't be passed on. And so Darwin actually found out that these traits have to be beneficial. They occur randomly. They're usually just mutations that occur. And so the mutations that are most helpful will be selected for, which is natural selection. So they'll be selected for. What we mean selected for, meaning like nature will kind of in a way choose which one is the best. And usually the one that's best allows for more reproduction, and so therefore they're going to continue on. Okay. So there are 8 pieces of evidence. And so here are the 8. We're going to go over each one of these. The first, so this is evidence that evolution has occurred. Remember, evolution is just a change in species over time. So that species have changed over time to better adapt to the environment. The first one is homologous structures. These are structures that are similar due to a common ancestry or relatedness. So, for us here, a human arm looks very much like a cat leg, which looks like a dolphin flipper, which looks like a bat wing, right? Now, do they look exactly alike? No. But actually, our forelimbs came from a common ancestor. And so therefore they look a little alike.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So we can look at bills, like beaks. For birds, they're similar. Now, they've evolved over time to work best for their environment, but they still have similar structures. And so you can see here's another. But how does this show evidence for evolution? Well, they have common structures, and they came from the same ancestor, we believe. And so it shows how these species have evolved over time. They came from a specific animal, and then they evolved to adapt to the particular environment. Okay. Another one is analogous structures. So these are similar functions and appearance, but they have different development. So they did not come from a recent ancestor. And so in this case, so you have wings on, like, say, a bird versus wings on a fly. But this shows evolution because they came from different ancestors, yet they still adapted to their environment, meaning they still evolved as well. Here we have like flippers, but also the streamlined body type to swim in the water. Penguins and seals are actually very unrelated to each other. They didn't come from a common ancestor, but yet they still evolved to their environment to best work in their environment. Our eyes and the mollusk, their eyes, they have the same structure and feature. They both are used to see, right? But we're not very related to them. but it also shows that eyes are necessary for these animals to see, and so they evolved to become as good of an eye as possible, right? Oops. All right. Vestigial structures. So these are structures that are kind of, you could say, left over from previous ancestors that no longer are being used, so that eventually they'll, through evolution, they might go away. So the human has no reason for a tailbone. We also have appendix that we don't really use, and then so here's our tailbone, but it might have been used by previous ancestors. So as we know, like chimps are very, and then you keep on going back, apes and then monkeys, and so they obviously have tails. We have evolved away from them, right? But you can see leftover things that are still with us that point us to what our ancestors might have been. Okay. Snakes evolved from amphibians, like reptiles. I should say amphibians were reptiles, and obviously reptiles have legs, but you can see there are places where there's legs, small legs appear on snakes. So how does it show? Well, it shows that animals or organisms have evolved from other organisms, but they still have some leftover stuff. So the evolution is still occurring. If you look at the embryos of different animals, you see that they are very, very similar, and so that seems to indicate that that we all kind of start very similarly, and so that can also lead to evolution, even within like how these embryos are like end up to be looking very differently. Artificial selection, so like we can breed for dogs, like we can say, oh, I want this property of this dog with this property of other dog, like a Labradoodle, right? And so the fact that we can artificially breed means we can select for things. And so we're kind of showing artificially how this can work compared to natural selection. So just showing that like change can actually happen even if it is caused by humans. This also show that we can create hybrids, so there's a fluidity of the species barrier. Here we have a male tiger with a female lion. We can create hybrids, so this shows like how things can change over time, even move across species. And then if you look at our RNA and DNA and proteins, you can actually see like things that are closely related to us have one, like, so here you see the human versus the gorilla. The only, in our hemoglobin, which is the protein that carries blood, you can see that there's only one difference in amino acid, whereas if you compare us to a frog, there's 67 different. So we're closer in macromolecule analysis to a gorilla than a frog, right? So if you're closely related to another species, you must have evolved at some point. Okay. And then fossils. So fossil records have shown that it shows us how things have developed over time, from dinosaurs to like, so here you have these dinosaurs followed by this prehistoric creature, and then now this current creature. You can see how they've developed or evolved over time. So the fossils have kind of shown us how individuals or organisms have evolved over time. So there's quite a few fossils that we can look at. So this has hind limbs. We can actually see like a previous human species, and so here we have fossil records of like previous, like that look more like apes to what we have now. So you can kind of see the development because we have this fossil record. Okay. Here's a fossil record of the horse, what it was previously. And then you can also see that how plants and animals are distributed worldwide. The fact that animals that are closely related, those fossils are found closer to each other, means that maybe it would make more sense if they evolved from that particular species. So marsupials are mainly found in Australia. Here's a sugar glider and kangaroo, but they're all marsupials, meaning if they came from a common ancestor, they should probably be found in the same place.